Now we have our skeleton and our moss giant complete with their attack systems. But what you noticed here was that we wrote the code twice. And what's important here is that we focused on the functionality. Now that we realized that, hey, we wrote that code twice, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can turn it into a modular design by sharing that functionality within our base class, which is our parent enemy.cs. So to do this, what we can do is let's check out the moss giant code. Inside here, we included the same logic for flipping the direction. So one thing I want to make sure is that this does indeed work for our moss giant when it's in combat, that it's going to flip based on where the character is. So here we go, we run. I'm going to let it walk. I'm going to attack it here. It's going to attack me. And then it's going to flip with me. You can see it's flipping. And that's exactly what we want. So that shared logic works identical to the skeleton. So that's the first thing that we can include into the movement method. We can actually take this distance here, in this code here, we can actually include all of it into our movement code. So let's just copy it. And let's remove it from here. Let's save this script. Let's go into our enemy. And from here, inside of our movement, we can then add that logic back. Now you can see here that we're already doing things with a distance formula, and we can only have one variable named distance. So let's paste it down at the bottom and let's fix up everything else. So here we're doing a distance check between the player and the transform. And here we're doing a distance check between the player and or our transform and our player. So this is identical. We're getting the exact same information here. So we can actually use this distance variable. So we can delete our distance variable. We can delete this log. From here, we're checking if distance is greater than 2. That determines if we get out of combat. We can keep that. From there, we're calculating the direction to face. You can delete these logs. And then here, we're just checking to see if you're in combat and you're facing left or right. And we should be okay. Let's save this. And then we can remove that code now from our skeleton because it's a shared code in the enemy class. So we'll delete it out of here. Let's save our scripts and test it out. We want to make sure that when we're merging this process, we're constantly doing iteration testing to make sure that functionality is not broken. So we want to just make sure that the skeleton and the moss giant are going to follow us left and right when they're in the attack mode. All right, so let's hop over to our skeleton over here. I'm going to attack it. You'll see here it's facing me. And then over here it flips. And that's exactly what we want. All right. Let's go ahead and stop playing. Then let's continue. The next thing we have here is our damage method. So you can see here already our scripts are very clean because they share all that common functionality within the enemy. Now, at any time, if you wanted to add some custom behavior to the enemy or any of them, you can still do so with the override movement method. That's what it's for. It just gives you the ability to customize them to be their own unique characters if you want them to be. Now we have our damage method. Now, this damage method here, we have two options. We can simply say enemy implements an iDamageable. So we can come up here and we can say, hey, require all enemies to have this iDamageable interface. That would then require this base class to have a damage function. The downside to that is that I wouldn't be able to necessarily tell which enemy you're hitting, versus when I damage them now, I can have a unique debug.log message in here, and it allows me to basically distinguish them. So I'm going to keep for now the iDamageable contract separate to each enemy. That way we can actually customize this damage method and have our own log like this. So here we can have skeleton for this one, because if I include it into the main, if I include this into the main base class, then I'm not going to be able to easily determine which enemy I just attacked, versus this way I have control over the damage method and I can make it unique to each one, even if they have a little bit of shared code. So here, debug.log skeleton damage. And that's what I want. All right, let's save this, and that wraps up merging all of their code here. So in the next video, we'll go ahead and take a look at setting up the spider attack.